Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, how Backblaze survived the great hard drive shortage, why Russian hackers opt to use floppy disks to pass sensitive information, and why U.S. Congress is telling telco manufacturers you better back away from China. Plus a big batch of your questions, our answers, and so much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 79 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We recorded this episode live on October 11th, 2012. This episode's brought to you by Godaddy.com, and I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the ever-scaling ScaleEngine.com. You should go check them out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is the admin, the professor, and the tech, Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, man. Welcome to episode 79. Big show today. Lots of stuff to cover. Before we get rolling, I want to remind folks that they can keep this show going, keep it on the road, keep us funded by supporting us directly. We don't have a ton of sponsors on this network because our content is niche and geeky, and that scares a lot of sponsors, but you can support us. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. On the right-hand side, you can contribute directly. Then you know that you are directly keeping us on the air. There's also a great system, though, that also helps out a ton, and it doesn't impact your budget at all, and we just added a new affiliate. So we've got this affiliate system. We have links at the bottom of our site for Amazon US and Netflix. Just added eBay after popular request. Now, it hasn't been added to the Firefox and Chrome extension yet, but it will be soon. And, it started... Oh, I just haven't given the info yet.
I know.
It's on me. But it started with a thread in the last subreddit, and then people are like, yeah, I use eBay. And I realized I use eBay too, like a couple of times a year. And, every now and then it's just the right source to get something that you need. So if you're an eBay shopper, you can use our affiliate link now at the bottom of our website to support us. Or Amazon, Netflix, Newegg, ThinkGeek, any of those are down there as well. And you can load those extensions in your browser. It automatically tags your shopping session so you don't have to think about it. So thank you everyone who does that. I like to mention that about every other show just to kind of remind people that we do need your support to keep us going. All right, Alan. Let's do our first story, because this honestly was in the back of my mind during the whole Thailand flooding and the hard drive shortage. Like, how are the people that...
So basically, the hard drive shortage was about a year ago now. So
yeah, it feels like it was sooner than that, but...
Yeah. So Backblaze, which is an online backup company, I think we talked a little bit about them before.
Yeah, we have.
Because of the cool stuff they do with hardware.
Yep.
They've done a post about how they survived the drive shortage.
This is really great.
Yeah, so during the hard drive shortage that started about a year ago, Backblaze found itself in a rather tight spot. In order to continue offering their unlimited storage for $5 a month, they needed more hard drives.
Right.
And then basically they found that in less than a week between their orders of hard drives, the price of a 3 terabyte internal drive went from $129 to $349.
Oh, man, I remember that. It was brutal.
Yeah, because they were buying even like 5,400 RPM, like the cheapest large drives they could get.
Yeah.
Not performance drives or anything. But they basically went up by almost 300% in some cases.
Yeah.
And they were calling around trying to find other suppliers or, anybody with stock even at the insane prices. And, the one friend offered them to sell them the drives for only $580 a piece.
Gouging. Yeah.
However, they found that external drives were not being priced insanely, partly because they don't move as fast and because there's no demand for them from OEMs, right? So basically, they found that a 3 terabyte external drive was only $169. So at least $100 cheaper than a regular internal drive. Mostly because companies like HP, Dell, and Apple had bought up large supplies of internal drives to make sure they wouldn't run out.
Right.
So for reference, Backblaze fills about 50 terabytes worth of drives each day.
That's amazing.
So they need a lot of new hard drives.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
When they say they add 50 terabytes or they fill 50 terabytes worth of drives, it doesn't mean they add that much new data, but because of the way they have to replicate data, they have to store it multiple times and so on. But still, they need 50 terabytes worth of new drive space every day. So during the height of the shortage, between November 2011 and February 2012, Backblaze had to farm for hard drives.
Quote unquote farm.
Yeah. They managed to get about 5.5 petabytes worth of hard drives from various retailers, almost all consisting of external drives, where they had to remove the enclosure without damaging the drive.
Ah, yes.
Because most of those come in an enclosure.
And they were getting them from anywhere possible.
Yes. They were rating every Costco and Best Buy. On the website that's linked, they have pictures of their whiteboard where they have like a list of all the Best Buys and Costcos anywhere near their office and like how many they had. And they would like every employee would stop in on their way home at each different store and buy as many as they could.
I guess a few employees even drove as far as like 100 miles. And they even like brought in some family members who had Best Buys in their areas.
So basically they found, if each employee can buy 2 drives, and we have this many employees times this many stores, we could probably get just enough drives. But then stores are out of stock. Stores are like, you bought 2 yesterday, you can't have 2 today, and so on and so on.
Boy, you got to appreciate their stick-to-itness.
Yeah.
It's grit.
So they had to bring in their family. The advantage to this was that they managed to buy some in different places, especially, places that maybe weren't feeling the drive pinch as much.
Aha.
Apparently, there's less demand for external hard drives in Utah than in California. Who would have thought that?
I guess, yeah. Huh.
And so on. But obviously, using the external drives also incurred other costs. They had to develop a process for shucking the drives, which is taking them out of the enclosure without damaging it.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just use a hammer.
And every enclosure is a little different if it's a different make.
A lot of them were the same, but a bunch of them were different. And, so they managed to develop enough of a process that they could get the company that assembles their servers for them to do it.
Nice.
Have their employees do it. So they would. So basically, they would start gathering up with the drives because employees would, bring in like their trunk full every morning or whatever, and they pile them up on the table. And then once a week, they would send a truck off to their assembly plant where they would put the drives into their pod servers.
Wow.
I have a link to information about their pod servers at the bottom. We'll talk about it at the end. It's really interesting.
Joran, Alan, in the chat room says that he has access to 30 Amazon accounts. So when he needed drives and they were limited to 1 order per customer, he just ordered through 30 different Amazon accounts.
I created additional Amazon accounts to get the drives I needed.
Did you? Yeah.
Yes.
I ordered 1 from Amazon and 1 from Newegg. That's what I did.
I ordered the limit from Amazon, and then another account on a different credit card, and then another account with gift cards.
Yeah, you were trying to get a big bunch. See, I needed a big batch, but it sucked, but I waited.
Now that the shortage is over, it was no problem. I bought 2 giant boxes of hard drives in the last little while with no problem.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was a bit of an issue.
Yep.
Like I said, many stores had a limit of 2 per customer. I remember having that same problem trying to buy with Amazon. And so Backblaze employees employed many devious tactics to try to squeeze out more drives. Sometimes you could just convince the store to sell you 4 instead or whatever. Or one guy called up and did his best grandma voice impression.
Hello?
And explained, yes,
I need a hard drive.
explaining that she wanted to buy an external drive for each of her grandkids.
I want to get them a Christmas present.
So she needs more than 2. And then he's like, and then he shows up at the store and he's like, yeah, my grandma called earlier. She asked me to pick up all these drives.
Wow. That's desperation right there. That's what that is.
Some Backblaze employees were banned from Costco and Best Buy stores or just asked to leave without any hard drives.
Oh, you're one of those hard drive people. Get out of here.
Yeah. And they said, especially with Christmas crunch, they had a lot of trouble then.
I bet.
But then they also relate some interesting stories. On Christmas Eve, the CEO of Backblaze stopped at his friend's house to pick up some hard drives that his friend had managed to order. His friend managed to find an online store that didn't have a limit of 2 per customer, and he ordered 80 3-terabyte drives.
Good man.
Yes. It took the FedEx driver more than 30 minutes to unload the truck into his apartment. So the CEO drives over to pick up all these drives, and while loading his Kia, he reflected on the fact that the drives he was loading into the car were worth more than the car.
Wow.
Because it was like 80 drives, and they were like $200+ a piece and so on. So now, the shortage is over, and Backblaze is mostly back to buying regular, Seagate or Western Digital or Hitachi drives. Mm-hmm. However, they do still buy external drives sometimes if they're cheaper. Costco had a sale. Process. They had a sale where the external drives were $30 cheaper than the internal drives. And, that's enough of a margin to make up the extra cost of shucking them. But also, one of the other problems they had with the shucking was they had to recycle the leftover enclosures. They just have like piles of plastic garbage.
Yeah.
And they can't just throw it away.
Right.
Yeah.
I've done that for clients where I've, especially during the crunch. Sometimes it is cheaper because the external drives were bought way ahead of time. So, yeah.
And so, they also had the problem that the shuck drives could not be returned for warranty service.
Oh,
or, they had to keep some of the plastic and try to put the drives back in them and make it not look like they were tampered with.
Right.
But, that's an extra cost for them. Normally, when a drive dies after a year or whatever, they can, or less than a year, then they can send it back to the manufacturer and get a free new drive. And they must send, a box full back every day or every week anyway. But they couldn't do that with the drives that they had voided the warranty on.
No.
So I have some links to some extra coverage of it, and their website that you linked in the chat room there has a bunch of videos about it. There's interviews with people talking about the problem, and then also just people with interesting stories about going around trying to buy these hard drives.
Yeah.
And then I also included a link to a blog post they have from a little over a year ago talking about the 2.0 version of their Backblaze storage pod.
Which is very cool.
Basically a custom-built for you enclosure that holds like 45 3 terabyte hard drives on SATA expanders. And so they basically build a machine that can hold, was it like 70 something or 100?
Right.
Over 100 terabytes. Over 100 terabytes for $7,000.
That is,
Of course, it's a bit more expensive if you only want one, as opposed to them where they're buying, 10 or 20 of them at a time or more. But, it's an interesting thing. I would compare the cost, actually. I was like, well, what's the difference compared to, like, buying a super micro case like we had talked about a couple of weeks ago? The super micro version that would hold 36 drives was about $1,000 more. And that's 10 less hard drives. Although that was a higher end processor and a bit more RAM and so on. But, at their scale, it probably makes sense to buy the custom hardware like that.
Absolutely. Fascinating story. And I was wondering how companies like them who sold on this incredibly cheap storage managed to make it through that particular tight time, because it seemed like it would hit them the hardest. And it's funny because you picture these big companies with these really elegant solutions, but it really just came down to boots on the ground, going to Best Buy.
Yep.
It's pretty awesome. All right.
It'd be interesting to see failure statistics on, how those drives pulled out of external enclosures compared to the regular internal drives. Also on speed as well.
In my personal experience, desktop drives in servers do fail more often.
Well, yes, the mean time between failure, like the stats from the manufacturer will tell you that. Mm-hmm. Although sometimes the question becomes, if the enterprise drive is $400 and the desktop drive is $150, why not just, if you can do RAID 6 instead of RAID 5 to cover the chance, then maybe it's cheaper. And that's why our two new 18 terabyte arrays are desktop drives instead of enterprise SAS drives.
Yeah, it all depends, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, Alan. Well, our next story tells us about the anatomy of an IT meltdown at a brokerage firm.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't? Oh.
Wrong story. Anyway.
What is our next story then?
The Russian spy case.
Oh, okay. We're not doing the anatomy of, is that later?
It's after. I don't know how you got confused.
Oh, okay. I think Chrome just opened them in the wrong order. That happens sometimes.
Okay.
All right, yes. We'll talk about
the Russian spy ring that relied on floppy disks.
Yes, let's talk about the Russian spy ring, and then after that, we'll do our GoDaddy mention.
Yes.
So what do we have here?
So Sub-Lieutenant Jeffrey Delisle pled guilty today to charges of breach of trust and 2 counts of communicating safeguarded information to a foreign entity. So the maximum sentence for communicating safeguarded information to a foreign entity in Canada is life in prison.
Oh.
So Delisle was an analyst at HMCS Trinity, which is an intelligence facility at the naval base in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It works with the Five Eyes, which is the US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. And basically, it tracks vessels entering and leaving Canadian waters via satellite, drones, and underwater devices, which is like microphones under the water, like SOSUS and so on. So basically, it's part of it is also for tracking, enemy submarines and so on. But they also use it for tracking smuggling and all kinds of other things. So basically, what he would do was he would go and use one of the secure computers at the base in the intelligence thing. So basically, these are computers that are not connected to the internet, and they're kind of supervised. And the whole idea is that they're separate secure computers that only get used for secure operations. And basically, he would search through the secure materials that he wanted and copy and paste data into Notepad on the computer and save it to a floppy disk. Possibly because the machine is so old it has a floppy disk and not any USB ports, right? It could be some kind of mainframe or who knows what it was. Or it could have just been that they disabled the USB ports to prevent USB devices.
Right. But who's going to use that floppy drive? Nobody's even got those.
We need the floppy drive for something. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But he'd save the data to a floppy disk. Then he would take the floppy disk to his regular non-secure computer and copy the data over to a USB stick. And then he'd take the USB stick home. At home, he would log into a webmail account and write a draft email and paste in the intelligence information or whatever he had stolen. But he wouldn't actually send the email. He would just leave it in the drafts. Then his Russian handlers, who had the username and password for the email account, would log in and read the draft email.
Clever.
Without it ever having been sent.
Clever.
Right? Because the email was never sent, it lessens the chance of it being intercepted.
Right.
Also, because they did it that way, they overwrote the draft email with each new piece of intelligence. So there's no log of what data he sent, only the most recent data.
Yeah.
The draft.
That makes a lot of sense. I never even thought about being sneaky like that, but just share the login credentials.
Yep. And don't actually send an email.
Yeah.
So there's no log that way.
Right.
So basically, they've kind of gone back and figured out what happened. So Delisle basically walked into the Russian embassy in Ottawa in 2007, showed his military ID, and asked to speak to someone from the GRU, which is Russian military intelligence, and basically offered to sell secrets that he had access to for money.
Well, that's not going to get him in trouble with anybody. They don't have a problem with that kind of stuff.
So basically, the Russians paid him $3,000 a month via prepaid credit cards.
That's it?
So that it wouldn't be traceable. Well, that was what he got per month. There were also some bulk payments.
My rate is $5,000, or I'm not even talking to nothing.
So the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is basically our federal police, kind of equivalent to the FBI.
Are they on ponies?
Not always.
Okay. Well, sometimes they're on ponies.
Horses, not ponies, but anyway.
Okay.
They started investigating after the CBSA, which is a Canada Border Services Agency, which is our customs inspectors, alerted the military after Delisle returned from a very short trip to Brazil with $50,000 in cash.
Oh, okay. Now we're talking.
You were only there for 2 days and you came back with 50 grand. What's going on there?
That's a pretty productive trip.
So after, questioning him about it, they let him through, but they called the military and be like, this guy seems fishy. And that started an investigation. And eventually they caught him spying. And so I have some links. The CBC has extensive coverage on the story, 5 or 6 different stories across the last couple of days. One of the interesting things is the fact that, this is supposed to be a secure facility, but he was able to walk in and out with a USB stick.
Just act like he belonged there.
Well, I remember when some friends of mine worked at banks while they were in college. We had a work placement. They weren't allowed to bring an MP3 player or a USB stick in and out of the bank ever.
Yeah.
Exactly for this reason.
Yeah.
And it just seems a little strange that banks have better security and policies about this than the military.
Money, Alan. Money is always a good motivator.
It's funny because this kind of setup was, there was a movie about it with Al Pacino. It was The Recruit with Colin Farrell as well.
Yeah.
And the girl would sneak it out by hiding the USB stick in the bottom of her coffee mug.
Oh.
There was a false bottom on it, and she would hide the USB stick in there so that it wouldn't be found when she went through security.
It must have been a movie. I've seen also where like they take the book and they carve out portion of the book and they put a USB hard drive in there. Oh, I'm just reading a book. Just me being a bookworm.
Yeah, but they might open the book, whereas the bottom of the coffee mug,
that's clever.
when it goes through the X-ray scanner, they don't notice.
And this whole time I've been putting up my butt. I should have thought of the coffee cup thing. I mean...
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
But, you know, it just goes to show how low-tech spying can be, right?
Yeah.
You know, basically, this is a system that you couldn't have got to through the internet or any kind of cyber attack. And instead, all you had to do was a couple of $1,000s worth of prepaid credit cards to some guy that works there.
Yep. And it's all for digital goods, which is just wild to me. And he's just using Notepad and email drafts to actually relay the information. I mean, doesn't get much simpler than that, actually.
Yep. So, yeah, instead of actually trying to take out sensitive files, you would just copy and paste information.
See, kids, you can be a Russian spy, too, with just a little bit of training. So if you stay focused, you work hard, and you get real sneaky, of course, don't get busted.
Yeah.
TechSNAP does not recommend that behavior. Otherwise, we might end up talking about you.
You know, it was kind of interesting how, you know, he just walked into the embassy and managed to become a spy.
Yeah.
You know, there's another movie I can think of. It was called Burn After Reading. It was a funny one with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. You know, when they walk into the Russian embassy, the Russians are like, "Is this a false flag operation? Are you guys trying to trick us?" It's like, we don't want your intelligence, you know? It just seems like the Russians would be like, "Are you serious?"
I find a lot of times you just need to have a serious attitude, maybe a clipboard or something like that, and people think you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, I walk into clients often, and I'm usually surprised, like, they don't know who I am, you know?
Yep.
I always try to identify myself. All right, Alan, we've got more news. Lots of news to cover this week. So before we go forward, I want to tell you about a great deal from our friends at Godaddy.com, who are sponsoring this week's episode of the TechSNAP program. And if you need yourself a .com, maybe you got a holiday coming up, you want to do a blog for the family, something, maybe, just maybe you have the ultimate Thanksgiving turkey recipe and you want to post it up on a website with the most brilliant .com you could ever come up with. Well, good news, my friends, because you can get that .com for $5.99 if you use our code 599tech. So you take the $5.99. That's $5.99. You add your favorite subject, tech. Sandwich them together, boom, you got the promo code. You get the .com, $5.99. If you're doing something besides getting a .com, maybe you're buying a host, you want to get yourself a virtual host, a little VPS to play with, I understand. I know how you roll. Maybe you got some renewals because you're a .com buyer and you got a lot of .coms. You got to do some renewals. I want to suggest you use our code GO20 off 5. GO20 off 5 will save you 20%. Boom! Just take 20% off the top. Bop, lower that sucker down by 20% when you use our code GO20 off 5 over at GoDaddy.com when you're checking out. And thank you to GoDaddy for rocking the longtime support of the TechSNAP program. Next week, we'll show you a behind-the-scenes video of GoDaddy's data center. So tune into TechSNAP 80 to catch a little bit of that. So thank you, GoDaddy. All right, Alan, should we do more news? More news, sir. Now, how about that? Now we're going to do the IT meltdown. Is it time?
Yes.
All right, let's cover it. What happened, Alan?
The SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, which regulates stock trading, handed out its first ever failure to protect customer data fine.
We've talked a little bit about something like this before.
Yep.
Okay.
So this stems from, although it looks like the company was up to much worse stuff than just that they didn't get fined for. Although the company is defunct now. But
well, go figure.
In the spring of 2005, the network traffic at the Florida office of Gun Allen Financial was slowed right to a crawl. And the company had outsourced their entire IT department to an external company called the Revere Group. So anyway, the financial company's CIO, who happened to be a partner at the company they outsourced their IT to, which
surprise,
asked the manager of the IT team to investigate why the connection was so slow. Turns out what had happened is a senior network engineer had disabled the WatchGuard firewalls and routed all of the dealer brokers' internet traffic, including all their VoIP calls and financial transactions, through his home cable modem.
That's perfectly secure and reliable.
I'm not even sure how you really do that. It would have to be like a VPN or something. I don't know.
I guess, right? And then, yeah. I mean, I'm
fairly
sure that's
difficult. Because how did the data get to his home to then go out over his cable modem?
Had to be through like some sort of VPN that they routed over.
So it came in on his cable modem, his computer turned it around and sent it back out on the internet? Like, that would really be slow. But
yeah. Well, they did notice performance issues.
It would take a lot of effort to manage to route your company's traffic through your home cable modem.
Yeah. And why?
But as a result, none of the company's trades, emails, or phone calls were being archived by the firewall like they're supposed to be.
Oh, good.
SEC regulations require that all trades, emails, and phone calls are archived and kept for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't, because they were being routed through this guy's home, and the firewalls had been disabled, and the logging was off, and so on. However, that incident and a bunch of others didn't actually appear in the final report from the SEC about the settlement with Gun Allen Financial about other breaches of security and policy. Some of the data that was routed through this guy's home connection included bank routing information, account balances for various customers, the account numbers, social security numbers, their home addresses, and driver's license numbers.
Oh, jeez.
Kind of stuff that, you definitely hope it was over SSL, but...
that sounds like, you get that information out there and somebody's going to become an identity theft victim.
Yeah, well, yeah. Whoever managed to come across that data could live for the rest of his life off of the money he stole. Especially since, these are people that are trading stocks and so on. There's a lot of money here, right? You're not just stealing some random person's bank account or their identity to get a loan for a car or something. You're literally draining accounts.
Yeah.
There are also accusations that the engineer who did this would purposely break things, then come in the morning and be the hero and fix them. So the manager ended up installing key logging on all the servers, and one time caught him logging in from home at 2:30 in the morning, connecting to the BlackBerry's messaging servers, breaking them, and the next morning fixing them.
Oh. It's classy stuff.
Although required by the SEC to keep copies of all emails for 7 years, there was a point in time for probably about 2 months where no one's emails were being logged at all. When an employee brought it up at a meeting, they were quickly told to shut up by the CIO.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah. In 2008, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority fined Gun Allen $750,000 for a trade allocation scheme conducted by their former head trader, in which profitable stock trades were allocated to his wife's account instead of the account of the customers.
Oh my gosh. This guy is a shady character.
Well, the whole company is, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, the company was all kinds of shady. And so really it shows that it was a failure of all the SEC and the FINRA that are supposed to regulate companies like this.
Yeah.
And, any auditing or anything that was done on these things was obviously pretty useless as well.
Something in the banking industry wasn't being regulated properly? No.
At all. But yeah, basically most of the employees at the IT outsourcing company, the Revere Group, were afraid to report issues because other employees had been fired for bringing up issues. But, and it's not clear whether the financial company knew that about all these IT problems. But they definitely, the point of the article is that if you're going to outsource your IT, you need to keep an eye on it and know what's happening with it.
Yeah. As somebody who gets outsourced to a lot, trust me. I mean, you just never know what these guys are doing. I had a client that I took over for who did all of their online ordering system, delivered all of the orders through email to the individual users who then scurried off and got the job done. And of course, their previous IT contractor had set them up with spam filtering that he was routing through his house. So while their mail server was up and the sending sides were up, his house was down and his Barracuda box went offline, and they couldn't get any email for that week or for that day, and so they didn't get any orders processed.
Ouch.
Yeah. You just never know. You just got to, and typical end users, they don't even know to ask the right questions.
Yep.
All right, sir. Should we move on to the next question or to the next email?
Sure.
All right.
It's
So
a
this,
question, or it's not an email or a question. It's a news story.
yeah, that all runs together, Alan. It all runs together. This next one, unless my Chrome messed up on me again, Facebook confirms researchers exploited privacy settings to quickly collect users' phone numbers.
Yep.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah. So basically, a researcher found there's a feature in the Facebook mobile app that allows you to compare all your mobile contacts against Facebook.
Yeah.
So basically, it finds any people that you have in your phone book but not on Facebook and lets you add them.
Yeah.
The researcher exploited this feature by basically adding random phone numbers to his contact list, and then from that was able to determine what a bunch of people's phone numbers were, despite their privacy settings. So while you have your privacy settings set to, hide your phone number so it's not displayed to anyone that looks at your profile, by using this, you could say, show me the user who has this phone number, and the person's, name and photo would pop up. Because, despite your privacy settings, normally your name and photo are shown, right? The idea, when people search for you, that's how they tell if it was you or not, right? So you're not giving away much information, but using this, someone can figure out what your phone number is. Now they have your name and your phone number.
Oh.
Facebook originally denied that it was an issue when it reported it because they claimed that their rate limiting and the privacy settings would prevent this from being a big issue.
Nah.
But the researcher posted proof in the form of about 800 and some odd phone numbers and the corresponding person's name.
Oh.
He blocked out random digits in the phone numbers to protect those people since they didn't do anything. But
that's good.
And basically he said that Facebook's rate limiting wasn't working. Facebook claimed it was the whole time, but said they made it even better. So now they restrict and basically temporarily suspend your account if they detect that you're automatically querying their database too much. So that'll prevent people from using this feature to try to just extract names and phone numbers from Facebook.
What is the legitimate advantage to having your phone number on Facebook? Why would a person be compelled to do that?
Well, if you want your friends to be able to call you, I guess. I don't know.
If they're my friends, shouldn't they have my phone number?
Depends. But yeah.
Okay. I just don't know.
Yeah. And there are other... Like, Facebook gets it automatically when you install the Facebook app on your phone, right? Like, Facebook wants it to be able to send you text messages and stuff, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have my cell phone number in Facebook.
That just seems like giving people who have the worst track record pretty private information. I mean, for me, it'd be a Google Voice number.
LinkedIn might have a worse track record.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. You're right about that. Yeah, big whale.
Well, I guess, no, that's more of getting your account taken over than disclosing stuff you didn't want to. Their privacy settings are pretty good because their whole setup is based on not giving out your information unless somebody pays them.
Yeah, that's true. So if you're a Facebook user and you want to read more about this, Alan has the full story, of course, linked in our show notes, along with links to all the other stories.
And there's also a link at the bottom here, how to change your privacy settings to better protect your phone number on Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, good. There you go.
So it lets you know what all the options are for you and your friends. So you can
maybe bring that around.
It walks you through changing the privacy settings on Facebook to maybe be more what you want.
I might send this to some family members, I think. Maybe like Mom. Mom's on Facebook a lot, and I don't know. Mom is a longtime Mac user, so she doesn't think about security stuff as much as she should.
Right.
All right, Alan, should we go to the next story?
Sure.
Now, this story is it true a TechSNAP audience member found a vulnerability in IE?
Yes.
Tell me about this.
So in IE 8 and possibly IE 9 in compatibility mode, IE will sometimes take plain text, even with the header set to plain text, and render it as HTML. So the way he came across this is he was working on some JavaScript code in a paste bin, and when he viewed the raw thing, the JavaScript executed instead of being displayed.
I see that.
So that means that, if you use, when you're expecting plain text, you assume that plain text can't harm your computer because it's plain text, right? Your browser is going to display it as text. It's
That's as safe as it gets. It doesn't get any safer than plain text.
Exactly. But Internet Explorer will sometimes randomly decide that, hey, this is HTML. I'm going to render it. And so he's developed a little proof of concept that he put into a pastebin. You go to the raw view URL in pastebin, and if it pops up a JavaScript box, that means your browser just ran it as JavaScript when it was supposed to treat it as plain text.
Of course, nothing happened in Chrome, but
yeah, nothing happens in Chrome or Firefox. It's only in IE 8. IE 10 is not vulnerable to this, although it's 8 seems to be, and 9 might be, depending on how the page is set up. And if it's being done maliciously, it'll be set up to make it happen. So
how do you screw something like this up? I mean,
it's trying to be helpful. Because
yeah.
You know, they'll be like, oh, some server that doesn't know what it's doing just sent us an HTML file but says it's plain text.
That's
I'm
exactly
going to be helpful, and instead of displaying a bunch of gobbledygook, I'm going to render this.
That's exactly.
But that's not what I wanted to happen.
IE is trying to be smarter than what they think the server might be configured. Oh, I could see the Triton developers right now hacking away at it. Oh, it's probably one of them dumb Apache servers. I'll just set this here. That way it'll just take care of it for our users. And they probably didn't even give any thought to the security implications of it. Jeez. Well, first of all, if you're using IE, stop. Second of all, if you have to use IE, because a lot of you are forced to use it for something, patch. Is there a patch for this?
Not that I know of.
Okay, well, when there is, patch.
But yeah, you know, they like to say that Internet Explorer is the best web browser for downloading another web browser.
Yeah. I heard one of the best features in Windows 8 is Internet Explorer is faster now at downloading Firefox and Chrome. So that's good. All right, should we go to our next story?
Yep.
U.S. Congress rules. Oh, how do you suppose? I haven't actually said. How do you say this out loud? Howie?
Howie? I have no idea.
I've never had. I've only read it. It's a security threat, and they've done some C block in here, haven't they, Alan?
A little bit. So there's a draft report from the House Intelligence Subcommittee that Huawei, or however you pronounce it, and
Howie?
ZTE, which are both telecom companies from China, cannot be trusted to be free of influence from the Beijing government and could be used to undermine U.S. security. So specifically, they're worried because they're Chinese companies and therefore subject to the Chinese government, that if the U.S. government bought hardware from these companies, that the Chinese government may force the companies to put spyware or something else into the machines or the routers or whatever they are.
They're just worried that they might slip something in there.
Yeah, because they've been basically worried about. There was a big story about counterfeit Cisco equipment getting into the military, or counterfeit microchips and so on.
Right. In fact, didn't as part of this, was it the story that Cisco had to break off ties with this company, or was it the Iranian company that Cisco had to break ties with? It's been interesting. They're cracking down on this stuff.
Yeah. So basically, the report recommends that Chinese hardware manufacturers should be barred from U.S. contracts and also acquisitions due to the security implications of Chinese-controlled devices in sensitive U.S. installations. Right, so basically they're saying these Chinese companies shouldn't be allowed to buy any U.S. companies, and that U.S. contracts shouldn't use this equipment.
Look at this. People in the chat room are mentioning I have a phone from them. Mr. Slave says he has a router from them. So you know what? This impacts
my router
business.
says FreeBSD on the side.
Well, very funny, Alan. Very funny. So, any thoughts on that?
The reason this story came up is because the U.S. We talked a little bit about last week, I think, about the UN ITU conference in Dubai. The U.S. is set to reject the UN's proposals for changes to global telecom systems, citing the danger of increased foreign espionage from China and Russia and these manufacturers as well.
Follow-up, I just mentioned, so Cisco has said it's cut ties with ZTE after an internal probe at Cisco revealed that the Chinese company also sold Cisco's equipment to Iran. So ZTE, I guess by proxy, was selling Cisco gear to Iran.
Which Cisco is barred from doing.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, the U.S. fears that nations like China and Russia will gain too much control via this ITU treaty, the new one. And would basically impose tracking and monitoring and assert control over user content and user information. But basically, they don't want other governments to have what, the U.S. is trying to force their local ISPs to do. Right? The U.S. government, on one hand, wants Comcast to keep track of everything you do, but on the other hand, they don't want China and Russia to be able to keep track of anything.
Right. Yeah, we want to develop the technology and keep it for ourselves.
Yeah. But basically, it makes sense that we don't want non-democratic governments to have a say over how the whole internet works.
That's true.
But at the same time, the U.S. government doesn't exactly have a stellar track record either.
The U.S. government seems to have a tendency when it comes to internet policy of saying one thing and then doing completely the opposite of the thing that they say. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Alan.
But they make an interesting assertion here. The U.S. says that ITU regulations are not an appropriate or useful venue to address cybersecurity. And they're right there, right? This is supposed to be about the rules for telecom and data exchange. And, if you want to have cybersecurity treaties between countries or something, that should be completely separate and not related to the core infrastructure of the internet and how the rules for, running fiber and so on.
Right. Absolutely.
So, if they want to have a bunch of draconian cybersecurity stuff, that should be separate.
Well, there you go.
That way it's easier to reject it.
It's interesting to watch sort of as some of this sets up. There was also just a Chinese company that was blocked from buying a wind farm in Oregon because it was close to a U.S. military installation. So more and more kind of things for preventing different intellectual property ending up in the hands of China and Russia. It seems like a futile fight. It doesn't seem like there's anything they can really do to stop it. That's one of the things about technologies. It just kind of spreads, and when something's invented, it gets out there.
Yes, but in the Cold War mindset, the U.S.'s technological advantage was its only advantage. Mm-hmm. Really.
Are you saying there's a Cold War between the U.S. and China?
No. Okay. I'm just saying that some people in the U.S. government still think like it's the Cold War and that they can keep inventions secret from other governments.
Party like it's 1980.
Yeah. Or 1970.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
No, that's about it.
Interesting stuff. All right, folks, you can find all the links to all that stuff in the show notes over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Just look for TechSNAP 79. You'll see the video. Scroll down a little bit, past the download links, boom, show note links. We've had some people email us just recently asking where to find that stuff. So that's where you find it. All right, Alan, with all of the news done, then that must mean it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or submitting a thread over at links.techsnap.tv, our subreddit, or using the contact form linked at the top of jupiterbroadcasting.com. Mr. Jude, are you ready for our first email question this week? Comes in from Andreas. And Andreas says, I just want to give a little more information about digi-pass. Hello, Chris and Alan. Longtime viewer here. I just watched TechSNAP 78, and I just wanted to inform you guys about the digi-pass that the Swedish banks use. We had a little conversation about this last week, Alan. All digi-passes have a personal 4-digit PIN number that you must input when you want to use the digi-pass. You also need to enter your full Swedish personal number when logging into your bank, like your social security number. So if you lose your digi-pass, they must crack your PIN number also and your full personal number. The last 4 digits of the personal number is not public, so it's pretty hard to come by. And no, our banks are not state-driven. They were privatized a long time ago. And the only reason I brought up, are they state-driven, is because it's like, how did they manage to all come together and agree on this one authentication system?
Well, in Canada, there are only 5 major banks.
Well, yeah, I mean,
we don't have the same fragmentation. But yeah, the interesting thing I learned is that the way it works is actually a USB device that reads your bank card. Right?
Oh.
It's not just a separate device or something. It actually, so you put your card in it and enter your PIN. So you're authenticating with your card and your PIN like you would at an ATM, but for your computer. So yes, it looks like a very interesting system.
All right. Now, this next question, I bet's been on a lot of people's minds. It comes in from Riley. And, oh, by the way, I linked, he included a PDF on how the digi-pass stuff works. So if you are curious, we have a link in the show notes. Mm-hmm. So Riley writes, thanks for such an awesome show. I've been watching TechSNAP since the first episode. Awesome. Thank you, sir. I'm wondering if you could provide some insight into GPG keys. Specifically, what are the risks if I install software from a PPA when the GPG key is not found in the key server? I'm a professional photographer, and I want to install Darktable in Ubuntu 12.04, but I keep getting this warning. Have all these episodes of TechSNAP made me just too cautious? Is it okay to add the PPA and install the software? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're interested, he's created a guide to to professional photography in Linux. He's got a link here that you guys can find if you are a photographer and use Linux and would like to read that. Thanks again. So, well, thank you, Riley. So this is a great question. Kind of what are maybe GPG keys, and then we can talk about the package signing.
Right. So GPG is a type of asymmetric encryption. It's basically public key type setup, just like SSL, but different. And in this particular case, what happens is in the package repositories, they sign the package with a key. And then usually as part of the distro, they'll have a list of keys that are trusted. So, right, your package manager maintains a list of the GPG keys that you can trust, usually defaulting to the official ones from the distro. Mm-hmm. So that means what they do is they sign a package after they make it, and that tells you that, hey, this package is official Ubuntu package, and you can trust it. Whereas if you just download some package off some random guy's website, you don't know that he hasn't put a virus in it, or it's, if you're downloading Apache, if you're getting it from some random website, not from Apache,
right,
you don't know that somebody hasn't put a backdoor into it. Yeah,
for sure. Like that happened to VSFTPD a few years back.
Yeah. So basically what a GPG key does is it works kind of like, how we do like an MD5 hash of a file, except for it's cryptographically signed. So it tells you not only the hash of the file, but the identity of the person who's saying this is the right hash, right? Because the problem with a website that says, here's the file and here's the hash for it, is that if they can modify the website, for like example, the PHP MyAdmin one that happened a couple weeks ago with SourceForge.
Oh, right.
If they could get into SourceForge to change the file, they could have changed the hash written on the website if it was also hosted by SourceForge. Mm-hmm. So then you check the hash and it shows up right, but it's the hash of the corrupted file. And so basically what a GPG key does is it confirms that the file content hasn't been changed, but it also confirms the identity of the person who signed it.
Right.
And so basically they sign it with their private key, and then anyone with their public key can check and say, yes, this was definitely actually signed by so-and-so.
And and this is an area where Ubuntu kind of falls down when you're adding packages outside the Ubuntu repos, because the authors of these packages are signing it themselves. But you essentially
that's what's supposed to happen, though. It's working exactly as it was intended.
Right, but for him, the end user experience is this scary error message that comes up. But it's okay generally to accept those, because then you always know that author of those packages is legitimate. From that, once you accept it once, then you're guaranteeing that all future updates are always from them.
If you're using a third-party package, you will get this warning because that third party isn't on the official list.
Not yet.
Now, you can add people to the list if you trust them, but you have to decide if you trust each third party that signed the package.
And see, I think that's
them not to include some exploit in the package.
I think that's where it falls down. I think it's too much room for user error. I don't know how they could do it differently, but I think
by popping this up every time anybody makes a package, everybody just accepts it out of hand, and now it doesn't end up catching. But the people that really care about this aren't going to be using third-party packages.
And it got him to got Riley to stop. So
So basically, if you trust the third party, you can add their key to the allow list and not get the warning.
Mm-hmm. I do it all the time.
It's not actually safe to just ignore the warning. If you don't trust the source of the packages, you shouldn't install the packages. You should get them from somewhere you do trust.
And what you should be really surprised by, what really should alert you, is if you're doing like an installation later or an update and you get it again, even though you've already accepted that repo's key, or you get some sort of key error, then really I would be concerned.
Or, if you're doing an update and you don't have any third-party repositories, if you're doing official Ubuntu stuff and you get that warning, you definitely probably don't want to install that package because it was signed by someone who's not Ubuntu, and you don't want to install that because it's probably bad.
Yeah. yeah. And I know how it is, because sometimes there's just that one particular application that's just not in the mainline repos that you want.
Yep. Or if it's CentOS, the one in the mainline repo is so old it's not useful.
I'm glad you said it, not me. All right, Alan.
Actually, one of the guys that works on the IUS, I think it's called, it used to be a Rackspace project, but it's an open source project now.
Okay.
Of maintaining a repository for CentOS of like newer versions of PHP and Nginx and all the apps you might actually want.
Yeah, kind of like Freshports does.
Yeah. Well, no, Freshports is just a tracking website.
They have a repo. They have a repo for Red Hat, or maybe it's not fresh.
No, fresh ports is for.
I'm thinking of it's not fresh ports. It's fresh packages or something. It's kind of like they've got a repo and they keep up to date CentOS packages.
Yeah,
maybe I got the name
is
wrong.
just a news website for FreeBSD ports.
That's where I'm getting it from. It's not fresh ports.
But
fresh RPMs?
Anyway,
I can't remember.
Something like that.
Yeah. All right. Next email.
Yes.
All right. Next email comes in from Rich. He says, "Hey, Chris and Alan, I have a question regarding SSL, specifically wildcard SSLs. I think that's key here. I'm looking at converting several of my software servers over to publicly signed SSLs so that the end user has a seamless experience. I run a lot of Novell product, including several ZenWork variations and Group Y/mobility solutions. All have web interfaces and all communicate using port 80 and 443. My question is, can I use a wildcard SSL in this type of deployment? Is there any reason I should purchase individual SSLs, or is it that a wildcard individual SSLs, or is this what wildcard SSLs are used for? I work for a school district, so I'm hoping to save a bit of money by deploying the wildcard SSL instead of 4 or 5 normal SSL certs. Love the show. Thanks, Rich." What do you think, Alan?
Yeah. So basically, a wildcard SSL certificate is basically a normal SSL certificate. Normally covers like www.domain.com. And usually just plain domain.com as well. Although originally they only covered one name, now they usually include with and without the www. A wildcard domain basically covers star.domain.com, basically, the asterisk, basically anything .domain.com. Although, interestingly, they don't cover subdomains. Like I bought the wildcard certificate for star.scaleengine.net. And turns out it doesn't cover jbdl.cdn.scaleengine.net.
Okay.
But anyway, so the wildcard SSL certificates will basically cover all subdomains of a domain, and so they're very useful. So yes, it's probably what you want, especially if you have to do, mail.whatever.com and www.whatever.com and, your bunch of different Novell apps. Mm-hmm. If they're all based on the same root domain, then a wildcard is the way to go.
There you go. Yeah.
Because, it's like, for example, the college I used to work at, originally they only bought SSL for their website, but then they had a bunch of different LMSs and stuff on different subdomains. And, for example, the LMS used by the IT department had a self-signed certificate. So it was kind of really bad to teach students to accept a self-signed certificate all the time.
Yeah, bad practice.
Browsers got more and more ornery about it over time as well.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yeah, get
me out of here.
Yeah, compared to the old Internet Explorer 6, and it would just click yes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It will work.
Yeah.
And now that it's 4 clicks, it was a problem. So they end up just getting a wildcard certificate that covers the entire mohawkcollege.ca, and then that way all their different apps were covered by one single certificate.
Nice. Keeps it easier.
And the nice thing there also is it covers any domains that you might create in the future without having to buy a new certificate.
Yes, very true.
However, if you need to cover multiple different domain names, there is one called a UCC, or Unified Communication Certificate. And it's very popular with people that run Exchange servers, but basically it allows you to basically cover a list of domain names. So you can enumerate a whole list of domains and subdomains and so on, and had them covered by a single certificate. And you can add and remove domains to the certificate, but you have to go back to the certificate authority and have them reissue the certificate. But basically, you're paying for a year of the certificate, and you can go back at any time and say, add this domain, and they give you a new certificate that covers from today until your regular expiry date. Some of them will charge per domain name, or some of them include 3 domains, and if you want more, it's $30 a domain to add it to the certificate, or whatever.
Very good.
The UCC certificates are more expensive than a wildcard. So normally you want a wildcard, but if you have to have separate domains, or if you have company.com and company.ca, if you're Canadian or something, or if you have a US and a UK part of the company, then if you want to cover both with one certificate, then a UCC is the way to go. And so they're especially popular with mail servers like Exchange, when you want to cover all your different domains with a single certificate.
Mm-hmm. Very handy to know. So it sounds like that might be the way to go, assuming everything uses the main root.
If everything uses the school's main root domain, then a wildcard is the way to go. And you can get those from GoDaddy for, I think it's about $90 a year.
Yeah. And if you use our code Go20 off 5, you'll save 20% when you buy
Exactly.
it. All right.
And you can't argue with that.
You can't argue with that. Ben writes in, "Hey, Alan and Chris, I'm a developer working for a startup, and I have a question about securing cookies. We're building an HTML widget that will offer communities to install on their own website. The widget is written in JavaScript so that it can drop into any existing site. So it's on a WordPress site or PHP or custom site on Rails. We already have a secure means to authenticate against our backend. However, I'm unsure how to save session data in the cookie securely. Should the cookie be saved to the domain of the community's website, or should the cookie be saved to our domain? How can I prevent cross-site scripting or cookie reading? Any general tips on this subject would be greatly helpful. Thanks, guys. Ben." This is an interesting one, Alan. What do you think?
Kind of. You can't have the cookie on someone else's domain. So basically, if his JavaScript is being loaded from js.hisdomain.com, he can't make it save the cookie to somebody else's site because the browser's cross-site scripting prevention will stop that, right? The same domain policy says JavaScript from this domain can't read cookies from that domain. It's kind of the whole point.
Right.
So that prevents that. If you're using a cookie to store the actual data, that means that the user can read it and possibly manipulate it and cause problems. If you want it to be really secure, the best way is in the cookie for the user, you just store some type of ID, like a session ID, like a UUID, or just a random number or whatever. And then in your database, you store all the data securely, and then you just use the session ID to look it up. The disadvantage of that is you have to maintain all that data in your database, whereas a cookie allows you to offload all that work onto each individual user's browser. So it's kind of a trade-off there. If you're already calling your backend, then maybe you can load the data, and maybe the data is more useful to you in your database instead of in the user's browser, because then it's available to you when the user's not on your site instead of only when they're actually each time they click. But yeah, if you want to secure it, the browser's policy should keep most people from reading your cookies, but your other choice is somehow encrypt it, but that's going to be in your JavaScript, so your key is going to be exposed. So there's no way to do a secure cookie really.
Yeah.
So your best bet is just store some type of identifier in the cookie that maps to something in your database where you actually store the data.
Very nice. That sounds perfect. All right, Alan. Our last note came in from Darwin. He writes to note, in addition to limiting the length of your password, Microsoft accounts also prevents you from using special characters. Some of them include like the space bar, and I think the caret was one of them too. I tried.
Yep.
I tried a couple of different combos. A couple episodes ago, we gave Microsoft a hard time for limiting the length of your Microsoft Online ID, and the reason why it kind of became more important is because now you can sign into Windows 8 using your Microsoft ID. So it's thereby limiting the length of your Windows password too, which seems like a bad idea.
Well, and just the fact that limiting your password to 16 characters and limiting what characters you can use, on top of the security implications of a smaller key space, it implies that they're not doing hashing.
Right? Because if they were hashing it, it wouldn't matter.
Scary as hell.
Right? It would.
Because when you're hashing it, it doesn't matter if you have a space in your password. It's just binary data that gets hashed. So it doesn't make sense.
No.
It's very concerning.
It is. It's very odd. And a big company like Microsoft, you'd think they would do... Microsoft knows better.
Yeah,
I don't know what's up.
Hashing it. So why are they just imparting random restrictions like you can't use the space in your password? And
we've covered stories that show that random words stringed together in an incoherent sentence are almost a better password than complicated numbers and capitals and symbols. And so they're preventing that exact secure type of password too. It boggles the mind.
It doesn't make any sense.
And it's generated some interest in our audience because we're still getting emails about it. But I will say, with that, we've pretty much spent through all the emails we've saved up because we also just recorded episode 80. So between 79 and 80, we've gone through all of our emails. So that means our inboxes are empty. And if you want to get your question or your feedback on this show, maybe you've got a system admin's questions or a beginner's question or something you think we need to know about, email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or you can use the contact link at the top of the website, or start a thread in our Reddit over at links.techsnap.tv. All right, Alan. Well, that's all the feedback. I believe that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit to the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them. The links are almost exclusively provided by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, and we often have the links all lined up so you can go do a little more reading after the show. Maybe you're jonesing for a little bit more and want to read a little further because we're just blasting through these last stories. Alan, our first story takes us to a mapping problem for Apple, which we haven't talked about much on this show.
Yeah, so, there was lots of coverage about the problems with iOS 6 maps. In this case, it's a problem where the map was too good.
Yes, that's kind of funny, huh? At least according to Taiwan.
Yeah, basically, Apple's iOS 6 maps show satellite photos of a secret Taiwanese military base where they're setting up a radar installation that can detect missile launches from anywhere in China. Because obviously the Taiwanese are worried about that.
There's also been some U.S. military sites that are listed on there that weren't supposed to be. There's and to be fair to Apple,
the government normally they go out to the satellite companies and say, these locations need to be blurred. Yeah. And Google and Nokia and everybody else has done this. And apparently Apple didn't bother.
Well, actually, a lot of the ones that Apple hasn't blanked out, Nokia hadn't. There was a side-by-side comparison. And what it really looks down to is you get to a certain size and market share, and then the U.S. government reaches out to you and asks you to start blurring these. Because there's a bunch that...
It's kind of weird that they don't talk to the companies that actually provide the imagery.
Right? Because if Nokia and Apple and Microsoft can buy these and then display them...
they're not buying... Yeah, they're buying these from satellite companies. They don't have their own satellite.
Why can't some terrorist organization just buy the same images? And not use Google Maps?
Well, it can.
So what are they accomplishing?
Exactly. So the question is, why doesn't the government just go to the company that sells the imagery and say, hey,
yeah, I don't know, maybe they can
blur this or don't sell this frame.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting story though. Just because it's something that 30 years ago, I don't know, that they didn't really have to worry about. The consumers didn't have access to this level of imagery.
Yeah, no private company could buy its own satellite.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk about this next story in the roundup. The U.S. and the EU clash over Whois data.
Yes. So ICANN, which is the people that run the Whois database and so on, they want the new version of the Whois database to contain accurate customer data that has to be validated once a year. But also possibly have it include the credit card and payment information for who purchased the domain, even for up to 2 years after the domain has expired. So the U.S. FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, thinks this is a great idea.
Oh, of course.
Because they think it would help, they're like, it'll help fight spam and fraud. Whereas the EU is like, this violates the EU privacy laws and can't happen. Honestly, if your goal is to prevent or to help have some way to track down companies that are committing fraud on the internet, their domain name registration isn't really the right way.
Yeah.
Specifically, the point of the Whois database originally was to find the technical contact for a domain in order to discuss an issue or something. And more, it's become just this database that gets harvested for spam.
Yes.
The Whois is pretty much useless. It was supposed to be like the IP Whois database, which is just, this is the name of the company that owns this part of the internet, and this is their technical person if you have a technical thing. Whereas more recently, the Whois database has become a database that law enforcement tries to use to go after people or whatever.
People that are linking to pirated content. People that got torrents up on their website. Got to bring those down, Alan. Any other thoughts on that one?
Not really. Just hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I know, right? All right, well, let's talk about the RSA boss angering privacy advocates. This one coming from Slashdot.
Sure story.
The RSA boss, I'm reading, hold on, I was getting there. The RSA bot Art Colverero. How do you like that? No? Anyways, he stepped on the toes of privacy proponents when he was at London's RSA 2012 show by accusing them of faulty reasoning and overstating their fears of Big Brother. Sounds like this will get me all riled up, Alan. By trying to limit what legitimate companies can do with our data, privacy groups are tying the hands of people who might protect us, he says. This is an interesting line of logic. When it is written that cyber criminals can steal our identities, but any industry action to protect us invites cries of Big Brother. He was even out. He was, he's an outspoken guy. He also complained that
if the industry action is to keep track of everything I've ever bought to tell if I bought something out of character and that might be someone using my stolen card, I'd rather not be protected.
Yeah, you know what? That's a fair trade.
It depends.
Yeah, that's a price that is too high.
Partly, I can kind of see his point that if the privacy people are going overboard with it, then it can hamstring legitimate stuff. And I don't want to hamstring legitimate innovation and useful features and so on. But at the same time, you can't invade my privacy just because you think it's for my own good.
What do you think about, you're moving into industries and maybe you want to become a cyber criminal? Yeah, it's a lucrative business. Lots of cybercrime. Hey, it is Cybercrime Awareness Month after all. But, like any business you move into, wouldn't it be nice if you could get a little business insurance? Well, I think that might be what this next story is about.
That's not exactly what this is. But
oh, come on. My pitch is so funny, though.
Yeah. So a cyber criminal in Eastern Europe is now offering insurance from prosecution.
Yeah.
Basically, for $100,000 that you pay him ahead of time, he will make sure that you don't get prosecuted.
See, this is cybercrime insurance. It's like if I was a jewel thief and I could get insurance if I ever got caught being a jewel thief, they'd maybe bail me out. I mean, I don't know.
Well, in this case, they claim they specialize in bribing or intimidating Russian and Eastern European police to make them drop charges against you.
Love that. Wow. How about that? That's shady.
Very. There's some speculation that this is some kind of sting operation.
You think?
I don't know.
I think it might be.
Sounds like some hacker legitimately trying to make money.
What? Well, of course, yeah. What idiots, actually. Do you think somebody's going to go for it? Anybody? Maybe if you had just so much money to blow, you might try it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting enough. All right.
It seems like if you have that much money, you could just bribe the cops yourself.
Yeah.
But then again, if you're in jail, you can't really do anything. So having someone outside that's dealing with the bribing and so on for you might be useful.
All right, Alan, this next story, I believe in the roundup you added, and I don't have any idea what it's about. I'm not even going to try. Not even going to try.
So there's a fiasco about some bids for a UK rail contract.
Oh, yeah?
And lots of different people being blamed and so on. And basically, they're trying to blame it all on a spreadsheet.
Oh, it was a spreadsheet error, huh?
Yeah. Basically, a spreadsheet being used for what a spreadsheet probably shouldn't be used for.
Yeah.
And some miscalculation or something caused the government to waste a large pile of money.
This is why I always say use Access databases. Access? No, I won't even go that far. I'm kidding. Yeah, funny how the spreadsheet gets blamed. It wouldn't be human operator error using the wrong tool.
Yeah, basically, one of the 3 people that got suspended about it says the department is portraying her role inaccurately, and there's some scapegoating of civil servants in the West Coast rail franchise fiasco. Yeah, there's a lot of people complaining here.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to next to the last story in the roundup. Alan, Phil Zimmerman's new app protects smartphones from prying ears.
Yes, so the creator of PGP, which is the commercial version of that, GPG is a clone of PGP, which was the first one. And basically, his new project would allow you to encrypt things on your Android and iOS devices, including your SMS messages, your emails, and even VoIP calls.
Yeah, cool.
This would allow you to encrypt. So
this is encrypting the storage, or is this encrypting the actual transmission too?
It seems like both, although I'm guessing for like encrypted SMS, the person on the other end would have to have the app as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Not bad. That's really great.
Although it would be interesting if you're sending a text message and it was like base 64 encoded of the encrypted binary.
Yeah, that'd be hard.
Well,
you'd have to use.
Is SMS limited to like a character set?
Yeah, it is. That's why Twitter is limited. Is because SMS is. They did like the
right. And with the short messages,
you'd have to probably use a different you wouldn't be able to use SMS, but you'd have to have something.
You could. It would just be messy as all hell.
Yeah, you'd probably do like a few like messages to like get things established, and then
one message. No, because if you just did GPG, as long as you have the keys of the people when you start,
Yeah.
which you can get from the key server or whatever,
Yeah.
then it's just a matter of the fact that your messages are going to get. Basically, one message is always going to take up, because of the padding, like even with only a 2048-bit or a 1024-bit key, the message can't be less than 1 kilobyte. And so that's going to be like 10 text messages. That wouldn't work very well. Maybe they can do something else to it. Zip it and base 64 encode it. I don't know.
All right, Alan, the last story in the roundup.
But it looks interesting.
You ready for the last story?
Yes.
All right, coming out of iprogrammer.info, Google Civic Information API. Now, this is interesting.
Yes.
If you want to build apps that make use of voting information on the web, there's a new Google API that lets you incorporate the information. The Google Civic Information API can be used to look up comprehensive voting information for particular addresses in the U.S., such as polling places, early voting sites, contests, and local election official contact information. I wonder if people start building apps in time for the election using this.
Could be. I imagine that's why they released it, although, yeah, they probably hope to get it out a little sooner, but the Google APIs are pretty easy to build with, so I'm sure somebody can do some kind of little mashup or something.
Yeah. Curious to see. Maybe we'll see like a big CNN touchscreen powered by the Google API or something like that during the election coverage. Alan, that's all the stories I've got in my roundup, yeah?
Same here.
All right, everyone. Well, boom. There's the show. Now, TechSNAP is live on Thursdays, except for next week. Just a reminder, we pre-recorded next week's episode. We won't be here. But if you tune in on the live stream during our regular time, I'm going to try to remember to put a TechSNAP Classic Marathon. I'm going to go back in the TechSNAP archives and throw on some of the early shows on the reruns. So if you tune in the live stream, you'll still catch some classic TechSNAP goodness. So don't miss that too much. Oh, yeah. Hey, look. There's the headset, the classic headset. Now,
Hurts with the earbuds in.
Yeah. But if we are going to be live, we're live at 1 p.m. Pacific, and that is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Right. And you can also tune in over at jblive.info if you want the audio stream for your mobile phone, or maybe you're sitting at your desk and they don't like it when you stream video because of the bandwidths and stuff like that.
Or because you're supposed to be working.
Right. You want to be sneaky. I understand. That's what I do too. So I'm with you, bro. All right, Alan. Thank you for the great show, sir.
Yep.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.